are back now with our second speaker. Greg shared a lot of insights with us about the ecosystems, how to build them, how important they are. Today, we're also hosting Boris. Boris is one of my longtime friends from childhood. We used to play soccer together, we used to party together, and I'm now super excited to host him here. Boris has had quite of a career. He had his own company, and then he at some point moved to Berlin, started at this little company called Zalando, ultimately stayed there until they went public, was their chief communication officer or head of corporate affairs, or whatever you want to call it. Then moved on to ProSieben, a big German media company, was there a CIO, which is a completely different role. How he connects that, I leave it up to him. And today, right now, he's working at a company called Omeo. Some of you might be familiar with that company. They provide a lot of transportation solutions. And Boris will talk about the role of communication as a central driver of your organizational transformation. Boris, it's such an honor to have you, to host you, my friend. I'll leave the stage for now, and I'll come back when you're done with your presentation.
All right. Thanks. So I hope that the screen sharing is working. Let me jump into my slides. So yeah, I have prepared 60 slides for you, so buckle up. As you can imagine, I'm a communications guy, so I will throw so many numbers and charts at you that you cannot imagine. So let's jump right in. We have about 30 minutes, and yeah, let's get going. So maybe just in the beginning a little bit about Omeo. Just in a nutshell, so Omeo was founded by Naren Sham, an Indian-born who studied at Harvard in the US, worked at some financial firms in the US, and then he traveled to Europe a couple times. Every time he traveled to Europe, he found it extremely difficult to book trains, buses, and flights because there were the entire traveling ecosystem was completely fragmented and didn't make a lot of sense. So every time he left Europe, he always thought like, gosh, there needs to be somebody who solves this issue. And after the third time, he said like, okay, I'm just gonna build it myself, which then became Go Euro, which he rebranded into Omeo in 2019. So we're now a multimodal travel search and booking platform, which connects, all sorts of traveling modes all across Europe and Northern America. And the vision of the company, of course, is to bring every kind of travel onto one single distribution system. Basically, making sure that what you can experience, like in Spotify or in Uber, like in that kind of sense, also across all different kind of travel modes when you go from A to B and make that connected. We have about 400 employees across the globe. So we have offices not only here in Germany and Berlin, we have also offices in Prague, in Melbourne, in New York and London. And yeah, our investors, pretty broad. I would say I've never seen a cap table such as the one that Omeo has, and I don't know how Naren managed to get that group of people together into one spot, which is like Temasek, Kinnevik, but we also have from the US, Battery, Kleiner Perkins, Goldman Sachs, Atomico, Lakestar. Everybody is basically a part of it, and yeah, so that's the idea in a nutshell. So, but maybe just going back to what So already said about my past. So I've never done the same job twice in my entire life. I've built my first company right after high school. So especially when I joined Zalando, I was really special there because I never went to university. I never worked for a consultancy. And that basically was 90% of everybody else in the leadership team was like, okay, you either studied at WHU or you went to McKinsey or Boston Consulting Group. So I did neither of those. I just worked all my life and did all different kind of stuff. When I joined Zalando, it was very, very at an early stage. So we were about 80 people when I joined. We were about 14,000 when I left. And yeah, it was quite right, to be honest. Of course, we went public in 2014, but in between that, I mean, building up the logistics, building up real estate for them was a big kind of challenge, let's put it like that, but also building their entire communications was quite challenging, let's put it like that. And yeah, I mean, just for example, just before I left, I created a conference for Zalando that was in 2017, where we discussed the impact that the platform economy has on our daily lives. And because back then we could already see that the platform economy is becoming more and more relevant to all of us, but most people still don't understand what it actually means. And now, of course, everybody's talking about it. We can all see the impact that we have, that how much we are sucked in every day onto those big platforms, whether it's the Apple ecosystem, whether it's the Google ecosystem, whether it's the on top of that ecosystems by Facebook or now emerging TikTok, etc., or Amazon. So all of that kind of economy and the logics behind such new platforms are super interesting on the one side, and also to actually empower people and also to build awareness around it, on whether it's politicians or journalists or the general public, is, I think, a very big ask for especially the European tech community to do so, because otherwise we will wonder in a couple of years why we are not having any kind of chance anymore in this market, and why we are so much dominated by American or Chinese companies. And yeah, so that was our goal, to form that kind of storyline also at Zalando. And then I left. I took over that role as a CIO at ProSiebenSat.1. So I was running the entire IT and tech for ProSieben at that time. Completely new skill set. But again, I think it was a huge time of transformation as a old school, let's say, TV broadcaster, moving into the digital space, building new business models, and also building a new way of creating a very agile organization. So you can see here, for example, we did great events where we try to create playful games with the entire organization, with the entire community, with everybody around, to show how we can bring agile methodology into regular working communities. And it was a lot of fun and a great success. But of course, again, I think, like, to be honest, also for me, I had to accept for myself that I rather work in much smaller organizations. I love to build up organizations and teams. So that's why I joined Omeo. And why Omeo? I mean, first reason is, of course, I get a super attractive playground. So the company is still small, still early. But it also already has shown that there is a working business model behind it. And now taking that over from a communications perspective, from a how can we create a very productive and very agile workforce, I think that is a super interesting position to take over at such a stage of such a company. And reason number two, also very important, I think everybody's talking about this nowadays, is of course a strong purpose. So to be honest, when I look at myself, what made me become the person that I am today, as I would call myself, very open-minded and very tolerant. I think all of that only came from traveling. So from my earliest childhood, I was traveling with my family throughout Europe, throughout the world, and having that and seeing different cultures, seeing different people all over the world made me become more tolerant towards many things. And in that sense, I think a company that has such a purpose of taking away those boundaries that keep us away from traveling is actually a great purpose, and something that I admire, and something that I have a great lust of working with. But of course, as we can all imagine, that was quite interesting when we see the world that we are in right now. So the idea, first, one step back, the idea that I took over then was, okay, let's rethink communications at Omeo. So my objectives that I set for myself was like, okay, I want to create a very strong corporate brand. So make sure that people understand what's the purpose behind this company, what's the purpose behind this organization, how can we build a great organization, how can we increase employee engagement, and how can we maximize employee productivity. So productivity always has a very, like in some sorts, also some negative notion. In my case, I see it more from a positive notion, that I want to make sure that our employees actually can focus on working rather than solving issues around their workplace. And that's exactly where we're heading with the role that I'm taking over here. So on the one side, my role is making sure that we have a 360-degree communications approach, where we bring together internal communication, which I still believe nowadays has become the most important communication discipline of any organization. And I strongly believe this is not an HR kind of function. It's a clear CEO and strategic function that every company needs to make sure that this is a top priority, especially in times like these. We bring together, of course, external communications, public affairs, talking to politicians, associations. In our case at Omeo, very, very important, because we have big, incumbents to fight, like Deutsche Bahn, like SNCF in France. And so there's a lot of stuff to do on that side. But we also need to link ourselves very much with classic consumer PR, creating clippings around our consumer products, etc., and investor relations, making sure that we have the right investor communication always in place, and that this is all working together very much. Then, of course, the second big piece, I would say, is workplace experience. How can we create like the whole discussion around employee productivity? How can we make sure that internal communication, office management, real estate, and office IT are coming so close to each other that actually our employees feel like this is all coming from one idea, one approach? I don't have to, think about different kind of teams to approach when I get onboarded, when I get a new laptop, when I want to use my smartphone for the company, when I want to book meeting rooms, how can I make big meetings inside of the company, outside of the company, etc. All that needs to come from one dedicated team, and that's what I'm currently building at Omeo. And so, yeah, again, this is what I would call a very fantastic playground. But the road, of course. So I joined December, and you can imagine last December, the world looked very, very nice. Like we were just entering our new strategy with Omeo, with a new leadership team, with a new set of great people that we hired at that time. And we were about to, shoot for the stars. And then COVID hit us. So in January, we could see Asia bookings dropping to 0. So as you can imagine, most of our customers at Omeo are people coming from either Asia or the US going to Europe. What is not happening anymore? Exactly that. So in February, we could see how all the Americans actually canceled their Easter trips to Europe because they heard about the first cases in Italy, etc. So all the trips from Americans to Venice for Easter all got canceled. We saw that in our numbers very, very early, but we still were like, yeah, we'll see how it hits us in Europe. But we could definitely see already the wave coming at us, and it became crazy. So in March, we could actually see a 95% drop of our revenues or bookings at that time within 2 weeks. We had to go fully remote as a company, which worked out very, very well, to be honest. And we went into the German furlough scheme called Kurzarbeit, which allowed us to make sure that we actually saved a lot of the expenses that we had for our workforce during that time. Luckily, the German government was very, very helpful on that side very, very quickly, and it all worked out very, very well. So March, April, May, global travel halts, nothing was happening. We were quite dead, to be honest, in the water at that time. So how would we go further? So I would say, like in that side, we understood this is an opportunity. Of course, I think everybody talked about how can we make this crisis become an opportunity. First of all, as a travel company, it's a very, very bad situation. I mean, you can imagine, I mean, we still don't know how this will develop and unfold, but nevertheless, we had to, get started. And so I was running the task force since day one. So that was already in January. We started with our task force where we brought together several people of the company that actually looked into several different dimensions. So the three most important dimensions we looked into was, first, how can we protect our people? How can we make sure that employee safety is guaranteed? How can we make sure that our employees actually have understand what's happening? How can they all assess risk? How can we make sure that the workplace is as safe as possible? As the second dimension was, of course, how can we support our customers? Our customers were basically all in total chaos. I mean, everybody canceled their trips. You try to retrieve your money. You try to retrieve or you try to change dates, etc. And to create a customer service that is actually capable of managing that kind of crisis was insane. I mean, you cannot imagine. I mean, it was like we had almost 3 months of revenues had to be booked back to our customers because everybody canceled their trips for the spring and the summer holidays. And to manage that was insane. And we had to implement a lot of automation, of course, but before that, it was just a mess, to be honest. Third big bucket was, how can we survive as a business? So we needed to make sure that we can actually surface the right clarity to make the right business decisions in those first weeks. So how do we assess different scenarios? How do we make sure that we are on top of what's actually going on and how this might develop? And in that sense, those three dimensions, were the core part that we try to answer every day in daily meetings with the core stakeholders within the company, and make sure that we create cross-functional awareness around all these three topics, and do it as good as we can. We defined three different phases that we had to go through in this crisis. So first of all, of course, it's acknowledge and adapt. So yes, this is serious, and you need to be aware that this will change everything. And if you try to deny, if you try to live through denial and stay on and keep your cost structure, for example, untouched, you will die. To be honest. Second is okay, manage through. Let's do this. I mean, okay, so we went from a hyper growth company that was expecting to grow by 100% almost every year. We had to move into a company that actually believes in, okay, we need to manage the cash. How can we make sure that we are not losing any more money in any kind of sites? How can we keep the money at our hands as much as we can? How can we talk with our investors in the best way? How can we bring clarity to our people that they understand the seriousness of the situation, but also stick with the company and get that done? But the third one is also was very important, to look ahead. We will come out of this stronger, and we will try whatever we can to bring as many of us to the other side. And that was very clear in our communication the whole time. So, of course, if you're the comms guy in such a situation, you can say, well, okay, this is horrible crisis communication, and oh my God, actually, I saw this as the best way to implement a very strong internal communication into the company, because I had management buy-in throughout the entire chain. Like, I've seen that in all different companies. To implement strong internal communication, through the management team is not as easy as it sounds, because it's a lot of ego. It's a lot of, touching different kind of parts of the also culture of the company. And this usually is very difficult. In such a moment, implementing a new communication strategy was not only seen as, as an asset, but also as doable. Let's put it like that. And so we need to make sure that we have a smooth transition to set up the company from a remote setup. We needed to make sure that we have a good transition into Kurzarbeit, so that we are not losing people, that people are not too frustrated with it, etc. And we needed to establish communication principles right away. And we came up with three different ways to describe. So we actually believe like the most important thing is that we have a concreteness, which is more important than transparency, which is more important than frequency, but all three need to happen all the time. So whatever we communicated, we try to be as concrete as possible. We try to give as much transparency as possible to our workforce, and we try to make sure that we communicate as often as possible. So that means we had to, coming from a company which basically did hardly any kind of internal communication, to a company that almost does internal communication all the time. So we did 2 all-hands meetings per week, all streamed, all recorded, so accessible for everyone. You have to imagine, when we went on Kurzarbeit, about 60% of the entire organization went on 0%. So they didn't work for us during those months of Kurzarbeit at all. They received money from the state, but they didn't work. And we still offered all these meetings to them, but they could stream them. They could also watch the recordings whenever they wanted, so that we make sure that we actually increase the way we communicate. We always had a Monday morning check-in where we said like, okay, this is what's happening this week in terms of those last projects that we want to actually fulfill during Kurzarbeit. And then we had always on either a Wednesday or a Thursday, we had company meetings where we communicated larger updates about what's the state of COVID, what's the state of the company, how are we progressing with some people topics, etc. So we also created a weekly update email around how COVID is happening all over the world and what are implications for our workforce in the different offices. We had a weekly people update where we said like, okay, those are the people that have, for example, still their anniversaries. Those are the new processes under Kurzarbeit, etc. Gave them a transparency around anything that happened on that side. And we created a weekly CEO message from Naran, where he basically gave us an insight into what his life is all about right now, how he's trying to manage through this crisis and get everybody and keep everybody on board. We also established several Slack channels to spread information and make sure that we have everything in place, and that we also create feedback loops. Like through Slack, you can actually see people coming back at us saying like, hey guys, this is not, we need more information on this, or we would love to have more updates on that, or can we take our chairs with us? Can we take our desks with us at home, etc. All those kind of discussions that I guess everybody had during those months. We also implemented Slido as a feedback tool for Q&As in all our feedback sessions, and which was also a great success, even though it was anonymous, which is sometimes hard to hear, because you can also hear a lot about people's anxieties, people anger, etc. with the situation. But to be honest, we had to also manage through that, and it was super important that we have such a open feedback channel, and it helped us also, get more clarity about what actually matters for the people, and that we're not only throwing stuff at our people, but also, having a dialogue with everybody. So the results after those few months that we spent into complete Kurzarbeit and also into the keep the lights on mode. So first of all, I think what was insane was that we were able to manage all the different projects we planned for through during this keep the lights on mode, when we tried to clean up our base, clean up our platform, clean up some of the processes that we needed, and also implement a few new automations around customer service, etc., on how to actually make sure that we can provide clarity for our customers, you know, and in that sense, that was all, to be honest, first of all, which is the most important on the business side, we actually did manage and accomplished a lot. On the comms side, I think also that was what made me, of course, very happy, that 74% of all Omeo staff was was satisfied, at least satisfied, with the communications during Kurzarbeit, which, considering the magnitude of the situation and the uncertainty also for the management during the whole time, is still something I'm very, very proud of. We actually achieved 57% of live viewership of our communications, which is insane. So that means that a lot of people that were actually 100% on Kurzarbeit still watched every kind of piece that we gave them live, and that was something that also helped us also drive information during those times of crisis. And just as a good example, also we had on average 26 questions per session. In some sessions we had more than 80 questions, as you can imagine, from our workforce, and we answered each one, and that was also something that was valued by our employees very, very much. But most important were the good ones. The good news were, like, we were able to bring back everybody from Kurzarbeit since September 1st. So since September 1st, we're back to 100%. So everybody's working full time, still mostly remote, but still spread out throughout the entire planet, I would say, because people went to their families in India, in New Zealand, etc. And now they all are starting to come back and also find ways to collaborate again from wherever they are. And that's already a very good sign, and bringing everybody back is super good. But also on the financial side, we managed to actually accomplish a huge financial round. So we closed a round of about $100 million with our existing shareholders, but also with some new ones, which actually helped us to know that we will survive this crisis and we will come out stronger, and can actually even maybe leverage some parts of that crisis to actually gain back customer segments we didn't have before, to be honest. As a good example, we also used that communication to drive further messaging down the road. So we had a nice piece in the Financial Times about how Deutsche Bahn is actually commercializing public safety during the crisis by not sharing live data with third-party platforms such as Omeo. So people who booked their train tickets through Omeo or from A to B or some other platforms actually didn't receive any kind of updates when trains are fully booked and unable and not in a healthy way. Yeah. So what's next? We will now adapt our communication framework. We will see how we can keep that high frequency of communication going during a time when everybody's back. How can we make sure that we have the right balance of communication tools available for every employee? Of course, we need to adapt our entire office space. We need to adapt the way our way of working. How can we make sure that collaboration and also innovation is happening also in times of a completely remote setup as a very young company? I think established companies have a big advantage on that side because their ways of working are much more established. But in our case, I think we were a company which valued being on site a lot, and now breaking that up will demand us to change and adapt. We are currently refreshing our OKR process very heavily. So I'm running that also from my team on now, and making sure that we have a very tight process in place and a much shorter cycle to actually get things going very, very quickly and ramp things up now again. And of course, we need to now foster a very strong, robust, and agile organization, even more than we would have ever done so in the past, I would say. Because in the past, when you have a big market where you can just grab market share, I think like it always brings you to the point where you actually might end up not being as precise as you should be about your organization. Now, with that kind of situation around us, where we need to be very, very efficient and very, very lean in whatever we do, we can actually make sure that we really focus on creating that strong, mindset from the beginning of how to bring back this organization and this product in the end. And of course, I mean, that's by far the most important thing at the end, to build the best possible consumer product, because people will come back traveling, maybe not now, maybe not in a year even, but at a certain point in time, they will come back. We've seen that over the summer. As soon as restrictions are lowered, people jump back at traveling like crazy. And that's also why I am not worried at all about the travel industry itself. I think, of course, there will be companies leaving the market because they will not be able to sustain this kind of crisis. But in the end, consumers will always love to travel. They will change the way of traveling. They will look more into, much nearer locations. So we've seen the way that people search on Omeo has completely changed over the last couple of months. People are looking into much more niche places all over the world where they can travel, and that is something we definitely will further cater to with our product. All right, that was it. Thank you very much. I hope that was a first insight, and I'm very happy to join the conversation now with Sorab.
Cool, Boris, thank you so much. Yes, and you already unshared your slide, otherwise I was going to mention it to you. There is this great quote from Andy Grove, the legendary CEO from Intel, who said, "Bad companies are destroyed by a crisis, good companies survive them, and great companies actually improve during a crisis." And based on what you've been sharing, I have a sense that Omeo tries to be one of those great companies that gets out of the crisis being even stronger than you were before. And you mentioned already a lot of the things that you have done. Now, Nixa is asking, did you discuss expanding to the new markets in case the travel business does not recover in the near future? With the $100 million investment that you got, I mean, that's a lot of money, but depending on the market company size, the marketing initiatives that you do, it can be spent fairly quickly. Do you already have some strategic things that you can share with us? Like if the travel industry does not come back as you're expecting?
I mean, so first of all, like, yes, being opportunistic in such a time of crisis will be very, very helpful for us. So I think what we are looking at is definitely some opportunistic M&A possibilities, but only on the market side. So our goal would have been to become a global company by the end of 2021. We have kind of delayed that kind of goal because of that crisis, of course. But when we look at the market now all over the world, whether it's Southeast Asia, whether it's Latin America, etc., whenever we would be able to see certain market players who are struggling in times of this crisis, we are open to invest into them, maybe start becoming a shareholder in some of those companies, and then by the time also make sure that maybe they become part of the Omeo platform in the future. Yeah, so that would be one opportunity. On the other side, we also already bought a company from Australia, Melbourne, Australia, called Rome to Rio, which is like a search platform for the entire globe. So you can actually look for destinations all over the world and find ways to get there through all different modes. You cannot actually book on site, such as you can in at Omeo, but there is a great way to actually search for different ways to travel. And so on that side, we are always also open, of course, on the tech stack part of integrating further players into our system. Yes.
Now, in our previous conversation with Greg, we talked about ecosystems and that many players in an ecosystem go beyond industry boundaries. What I see so far, and correct me if I'm wrong, Omeo is primarily within the travel industry, right? Do you see any opportunities, any areas, or anything where you could go beyond that boundary of being a player in a specific industry, be it travel, especially given that travel and then hospitality is the most hit industry in our current pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, in general, like before the COVID crisis happened, there were many discussions inside of our company on such things. But we also need to be aware, and that is something that I learned at Zalando very much. It's like focus first on the market you have in front of you and in front of yourself. And when you look at the travel industry, I mean, look at it. It's one of the most broken industries from a user experience that I've ever seen in my life. That's still up there. I mean, all big industry, like all big parts of our user journey every day, whether it's music, whether it's hailing a ride, whether it's grocery shopping, etc. They all are becoming more and more filled with digital solutions that actually make your life much more easy. When you look at travel, I mean, still even today, you have the situation where you have to bounce between several different applications, where you have to bounce between like thousands of tabs in your browser to actually get a sense of how to get to certain kind of parts of your travel journey. And so I believe like our market that we are currently in is still so big, and so there's such an enormous potential for innovation on the consumer side, that we would be foolish to extend that right now. So I think like once we have a good sense of a very core consumer proposition, which still is, to be honest, not there yet, to be honest, because it's such a large chunk. You have to implement, I mean, just imagine, I mean, the kind of players we have to talk to here are bus companies in Slovakia, train companies in Germany who basically are run by the state and have no interest in, they don't care if they make money or not. They know whenever they have an issue, they ask for the state to give them more billions, and they receive them without questions asked. As now you can see with Deutsche Bahn, as now you can see with SNCF and other players in the European market. So discussing with all these players to find and negotiate terms with them, find ways to implement them onto your digital platform, on your tech platform, find a way to get an API with one of those bus companies. Trust me, that's a challenge. And so I think like there's still so much room for us to innovate, even in that small bucket, I would say, that it will take us years to get there. And so we need to focus, and rather focus now. As I said it also always with Zalando. So with the founder of Zalando, I always had a running bet, like when is Zalando moving to and finally opening up the US market? And I won that bet for 5 years ago, I think. And they're still not there, because they still have so much room to grow in their natural habitat right now. So there's no need for them.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not like travel is completely gone. You mentioned that within February and March, your revenue went down by 95%, but it has been picking up again. And I've been following Airbnb as another example in the travel industry that tries to be one of those great companies that are improved or defined by a crisis. And when their founder, Brian Chesky, speaks, he talks a lot about how the habits of people or how the destinations have changed. So instead of going from Germany to New York, you go from maybe you travel within Germany, but you still travel in order to have that get that job done, right? Have that experience, get out of your house, see new stuff. And those companies can still be making money, making revenue in that case, and serving their customers well. Now, Pedro is asking an interesting question. The question is, what would you say is the toughest thing to implement regarding the Corona situation in order to maintain your culture? And I personally can imagine Omeo being a young company, being a smallish company, right? Having a very startup culture, and suddenly everyone is not seeing each other anymore. And before that, you had a ton of collaboration. Maybe you share a bit about that.
Yeah, so I think like great question, first of all, Pedro. And I think like my first thing that always comes to my mind is onboarding. Onboarding, I mean, I mean, everybody who knows me at ProSieben or also at Zalando knows how passionate I am about the process of onboarding, because there is this one spot where you are able to inject a culture into a new starter and also take that new starter's own culture and implement it into yours. And that's during those first weeks. Whenever a person joins a company, the culture of a company changes. And whenever a person leaves a company, the culture of the company changes. And that is something everybody has to acknowledge. And now, being in a very remote setup, having a very good and lean and still super highly engaging onboarding process is, I think, one of the toughest things to achieve for us as Omeo, because we were not done yet. I mean, I think it would have taken us the entire year of 2020 to actually establish a great set of values, a great set of, like what are the characteristics of top talent to identify in this company. And now we have to do that in a complete remote setup, and that will just, I think that is something we are all still working on right now as we speak. I will have some more conversations on that next week, and so far I think we haven't cracked the code yet for us as Omeo, and we need to do that now very, very fast, because we are starting to hire again very, very heavily right now on the engineering side, but also on the product side. And during that time, we cannot, accept that we hire people that then leave the company within 2 or 3 months because they just have not been onboarded well and they have not gotten a grip on the culture. So I think, like, to be honest, I think that's key to everything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So during your talk, you mentioned safety a few times.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess this is safety in terms of not getting an infection. But I also interpreted a bit with regards to like feeling safe from a psychological perspective, right? So feeling secure, being sure that your company takes care of you and that you matter in that organization. And what I'm wondering now, given the situation that we're all in, and some people take like big stabs at the government saying, oh, they don't tell us what's going to be in 3 months, because they can't know what's going to be in 3 months. And it's the same for you. You don't know where the company is going to be, where the industry is going to be in 3 months. How do you provide that safety to people?
Mm-hmm. I mean, first of all, there were some great numbers on that already early on in the crisis, that actually during such a crisis, employees actually value the communication of their company or their Arbeitgeber, employer. Sorry, their employer. Much more than any other information they receive, rather than any information they receive from the news sites or from politicians. And that was something we knew that was also happening at Omeo, because people actually, they want to have a direct connection. And I think psychological safety, I mean, again, everybody who knows me at ProSieben, I was preaching that topic the entire time. And here at Omeo, we're in the same spot. Like how can we create a culture where people can raise their opinion, raise their concerns, raise their anxieties without feeling in any kind of way laughed at, pressured at, or ridiculed, or also even threatened. And I think we are a super multicultural company. So Omeo, even though we're just not even 400 people, we have more than 45 different nationalities in the team. And that is a huge challenge, and this is not something you can just deny. And I would say, if you have a very streamlined organization, in such cases, sometimes it sounds much easier to have psychological safety. I think in our case, with so many different cultures, it demands of us as leadership a lot of time to reflect, a lot of possibilities to offer feedback, a lot of, also accepting criticism as leadership, even though, because you have to show your vulnerabilities. Even as a management team, you need to show that, no one, we are all in this together. No one was able to predict how this can develop over the time, and we have seen so many wonderful acts of compassion by so many of our employees, by just offering their help to all other employees, by offering them insights into what they are doing, how they are dealing with the crisis, being stuck at home. We had so many people joining Omeo in January and February, coming from the most distant places from the planet, and just joining, just having a small little apartment in Berlin, being completely alone, and offering those people a way to not completely freak out, and also having chances to still meet people, even though it might be dangerous. But on that side, still, we need to accept that being human is even more important in the end than completely isolating yourself. And even though it sounds like that it sounds a little weird, but completely freaking out on your own, that would have been the worst thing. And we were so happy when the restrictions were lifted again, also in Berlin, and people could at least meet for a picnic, at least meet for in the park, and just meet and talk with each other. And that kind of stuff was just super important to establish. But it's a huge challenge, I would say. And there's no right or wrong on this. And I think we all have to acknowledge that how basically unprepared we all were for such a situation.
Yeah. But I think the one slide that you showed, and there were three things on it. One was I remember it was transparency and frequency. I forgot about the third one. Concreteness, right? But I think doing that, right, in a very frequent scenario, ideally with a set rhythm, that rhythm itself gives people some kind of predictability, and based on that, safety. So they at least know you will be communicating to them and will be answering their questions. Now we have another question related maybe to your onboarding topic, where it is about getting people into the company. This is more about making sure that people don't lose their knowledge and skill set. You mentioned a lot of your people went down to 0% due to Kurzarbeit. So how did you deal with that? Like, that people stay sharp, people basically don't lose what makes them so valuable.
I mean, one of the most insane things was, I don't know if you've heard about this group called the Mentoring Club, which was created during COVID. It's a group of really senior experts from the industry all over the world, and they all came together and offered their mentoring to people for free on such a base. And that one came from Omeo. Those were Omeo leaders who were on Kurzarbeit and offered their mentoring to everybody. And the Mentoring Club is now a big movement. You can follow it on LinkedIn. It's insane. Some of those leaders actually left Omeo also during the time of the crisis and joined other companies such as Delivery Hero or Zalando, etc. So because we're all such a big, I would say, family also here in Berlin, where people all came together and tried to make sure that we create a community that is beyond what you have to do regularly at work. It's more about how do you actually stay connected? How do you actually stay on top of things? How can you actually learn? And we created so many great groups on Slack where people started to, come together, teach each other certain things. So one of the girls that I had in my team on office management, she did a training on becoming a web designer. And she now even leaves my team and is becoming a full-time web designer at an agency. So that's actually, you can clearly see that, I do believe the number one priority for everybody is ownership in such situations. Like you need to, even though this time is very hard and very, very, threatening for every one of us, you still need to decide for yourself on what you believe can be something that you want to achieve during that time. And it's not about, I need to learn new languages. I think there were also some great people who just used that time to really, tune off and really have, for the first time in their lives, 3 months where they basically didn't want to do anything. And I think that's totally fine. Everybody had the right to take that time by themselves. But there were also great people who started, workouts, doing learning new development languages, etc. So I think, like in that sense, allowing people that space is super important, and that was also key for us, I think, as an organization, to go through this as smooth as possible.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you had to take care of your kids and their education during that period. I think you were already pretty occupied with that and had a lot of empathy for the teachers.
Yeah.
All right, Boris, we're at the end of our time box. In order to give everyone 10 minutes of break before we get to have our next speaker up, Antoinette, I'll thank you very much, and I'll see you hopefully very soon, my dear friend.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me. Talk soon. Bye.